I said this at the beginning, and I'm going to say it again. It's a harder reread.
Surprise! This is Wind and Truth. Welcome back to Next Chapter. I'm Marty, and this is Jaden, and we are reading Rhythm of War. We are in part 2 and 3 for this book, and for me, it has been pretty incredible, but I have not heard as good from Jaden on this reread.
No, I do like it. Okay. I feel like I've nitpicked more in the reread for sure, but I do like it. We're in, like, the 2 and 3 is the meat of the book, I feel like, at this point. A lot happens, a lot of interesting stuff, some pivotal events that we'll talk about, but I also feel like the less exciting stuff is more amplified to me on a reread than it would be otherwise. And I think that is just a little bit bothersome.
It is just so funny because you and I are having completely opposite experiences this time. I am so obsessed with this book. Every time I'm reading it, I'm just like, have this little conflict in my mind of like, well, I do love book 2 the most, but book 1, I can't really like turn my back on that one because it's book 1. But book 4 is so good. I just love the whole experience of them discovering the tower and discovering new things. For some reason, is so exciting to me. I love the science and the experimentations. I love all of the answers that we are getting throughout this book.
That's a good point. There are a lot of good answers.
It's a book of cool answers, isn't it?
Yeah. A lot of reveals, a lot of like stuff you didn't know before, but I don't know. Did I talk about this in the last podcast? I feel like I'm a broken record now. But it's like, if the meat of a story or a book is based on reveals, then it's harder to reread. I just can't get past that in my mind.
But it's not like a reveal for me. It's more like we're giving you answers on how things work, but it's so sciencey for me. It's starting to, it answers questions, but also gives you more questions at the same time. It's just such a...
I did notice more
I like
things.
that.
I did notice quite a few more things, I think, especially with like the intros to each chapter and the interludes. Yeah. And then that was especially between 2 and 3. We get like the Risen interlude, and I'm like, oh, this time, now that I've actually read Dawn Shard, it makes sense.
Yes.
Things like that are helpful for sure on a reread.
Oh, very, very helpful. I thought you were meant lift for a second too.
No.
Which is interesting.
She's interesting. She's very interesting.
Let me write that down before we forget.
Overall, would you put? So we're doing, as we've talked about so many times, we're rereading with you as we prepare for Wind and Truth and Dragonsteel and all that excitement. Would you put parts 2 and 3? Where would you put them? Kind of in the overall sense of the book. Would you say like this is the pivotal moment? This is the best crowning part of the book? Or are we still waiting for a massive Sanderlanche at the end?
You always got to wait for the Sanderlanche, right? You can't.
That's usually true, but
it's always good.
You seem to be very excited about parts 2 and 3. I know before the podcast, you're like, I am so pumped.
I am. And like I was saying, I just love the tower is so fascinating to me. I don't know why I am obsessed with Urithiru, but the whole thing about it just being, like, maybe it was that my whole life I grew up, I thought I was going to be an engineer. I turned out to be an accountant, which is still fun. But who knew someone would say that? But
stay in school, kids.
It's great. But engineering, though, it still fascinates me a lot. And the engineering of the building and how it works and just like why. It just, everything's amazing. To me, the discovery of the building of Urithiru and the discovery of Dalinar's powers as a bondsmith are both coincide as extremely fascinating to me, and I want to know as much as I can about them as possible, like as soon as possible. And like that's why this is so intriguing to me, this whole story. And then how the tower has secret rooms to hide in, and Kaladin's running through it, and that the Fuse don't even understand the building, and the building starting to talk to Navani, and it's just fascinating.
The Sibling.
Yeah, it's just so good.
Whose storyline did you like the most in these parts? You have to choose one.
So we read parts 2 and 3, and so since we just finished part 3, I feel like the only storylines we get is Navani and Kaladin. But we've got the Shadesmar experience as well. We've got Dalinar going off to war. I think a
huge part of it's Adolin's experience.
Yes,
and that's even in part 3, isn't it? Or is it all finished in part 2?
There's nothing from them in part 3. Isn't that crazy? That's a long wait.
But yeah, it's pretty fresh in my mind. But like Adolin's experience with lasting integrity, like This is the reason why I'm like, we need to do this in different sections of the book and not just use the parts, because they always end with a cliffhanger. And I'm like, what's happening? Like, what's going on? Like, that's the best part, is like rolling into the next part because you're so excited to hear what happened. Like, right after this podcast, I'm probably going to finish the evening starting part 4, because it's like, I just have to get to that next moment.
Oh, so
because there's so many things that are just hanging on a precipice right now. But what I was going to say is, I liked Adolin's storyline. I liked Lasting Integrity and the Shadesmar stuff, because I really like, I just like his arc through this book more than I thought I would.
Yes.
And that, I think, is the biggest change on a reread for me. It's like, I'm liking his story a lot more. Whereas obviously there's more powerful stories that I still love. Yeah, but I don't think I appreciated his as much the first time I read it.
Yeah, I think I loved Adolin's part on the first time I read it too. Yeah. And this time I loved it just as much too. As you can tell, I'm so stoked.
You're pumped. You're very pumped for this.
Yeah, I let's jump into all of that.
Okay, let's do it.
Before we get that, I will answer your question. I think Navani is my favorite part. Okay. Actually, this is such a short part, but Yasna's scene is probably my favorite so far in the book.
Okay.
I think her going to war and using her shard plate is fascinating, and her talking with Wit, and just all that whole experience of just getting to finally see something from Yasna's perspective was so cool. Like, I really, really loved
to see what she's like as a queen.
Yes, and what's going on in her mind.
Yeah.
I want to know what she's thinking instead of just what everyone else is thinking about her.
That's a good point. Is this the first time we get that?
I think it is.
Huh.
Which I love. Well, we may have gotten that once a little bit at the end of Words of Radiance, when she comes back to comes back from Shadesmar and meets Wit and talking with Wit and stuff like that.
So if we stay on Yasna for a second, the fighting style, so cool, because it's so different. Like, we've never seen someone really fight with soul casting before. It's just not there's been like traps.
Yeah,
and
let's
start
let's just start with Yasna and we'll
just
go.
Yeah, okay. So Yasna, I just love the fact that she's turned it into a weapon, whereas mostly even Shallan's like the deception element of it, but also it's really more like, you can set up traps, or you can do these things, or you can escape from something by turning this into that or the other thing. But she's like active combat. She's able to soul cast, which just got to be so hard. You think about like the intent and the convincing and all this stuff, but she's so good at it. She can just do it
all she says is change, and then she's like,
now.
Would she turn like the air into oil?
Yeah,
and
lit
lights it on fire.
Pretty
How
awesome.
insane! What a cool moment. That is going on one of my top 5 moments.
That's
by the way.
Probably going to be a high moment for just the cinematic effectiveness of what that's going to look like.
And then also her just kind of learning about the brutality of war and how like hard it is and everything.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking about the cinematography though. I imagine it like that air ripple, almost like you see with like a Dune film style. Where like the black fireworks that they have, they just like ripple out through the air.
Oh yep.
Almost like reverberations. That's how I see the soul casting of like the air happening into oils, like.
Ooh.
It's so cool. There are those moments where you're like, oh, I really hope that happens that way in the movie, because that would be so awesome.
That would be so cool.
Yeah, I'm just telling you what. We probably won't be involved, but
but it has to be that way.
But there could be. We could help.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just cool too, because you start hearing from Wit in these parts too, and how connected she is with Wit. Like, I don't know how much Wit and her are talking about, and she's like, Wit obviously knows a lot of stuff. Seems like Wit trusts her. I don't know what that means. Like, does he trust her with Cosmere stuff too?
He has. He does in the book. He talks to her a lot about the Ghost Bloods and their goals and what they're trying to do. Yeah. He talks a lot about that. And there's actually other parts in this book where they go over, like, they're trying to get Stormlight off world. They're trying to figure out how these different things work. And they're explaining, like, they even explain more about, like, why Lift is the way that she is, and what what's it called?
Light.
What Life Light is, and Tower Light is a different thing. And you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Stormlight was its own thing, and now it's like, it's like 1 of 5. It's no big deal.
3 actually, but
still feels like there's a lot.
We're gonna call that.
No, because there's Void Light. It's gotta be at least 4.
No, it's a Void Light, Stormlight, and
Lifelite. And Tower Light's what, a combination of that? It's considered its own light.
Yes, because it's a combination
of Lifelight and Stormlight.
Yes.
But that isn't...
I'm like, you didn't miss this part, did you? It's like the main part of the book.
Okay, but are you going to tell me that just because you can mix blue and yellow to make green, there's only 3 colors? Got him. Thank you.
Well, I get you.
Oh, no.
I just don't want to get called out by the commenters.
That is probably the best analogy I could possibly have given in that moment.
Well, it's a good analogy.
It's a great analogy.
It still doesn't change that there's only 3 types of powers.
I disagree. There's not 3 types of light. I do. I will fight you in the comments. But that analogy was perfect. You got to give me that one.
Yeah, I know. It makes sense to me. I understand what you're saying, but it's just
You're just hedging the fact that someone in the comments is going to absolutely destroy me.
Well, it's still not... Okay, this is where it comes back to.
I think Tower Light can be considered a different light, even though it's a combination of 2 lights.
But it doesn't matter, because...
Probably not.
I'm just saying...
But it matters in this podcast.
Well, the reason why I'm saying it this way is because every single light is related to one of the 3 shards on the planet. And so technically, every single one of there's only 3 of them. 3 powers of... it's an investiture. That's what it really is. It's not really light. It's investiture. Yeah. And we've seen in other books them trying to combine metals and pull them apart, which is interesting.
But
to make
it works.
New things. Yeah.
Right?
It does.
Maybe.
It does make a new thing, but it's not like a new thing.
Yeah, and also other things that are combined explode, just like these things that are combined explode.
Isn't this fascinating? It's so cool.
It is cool. I'm not saying that it's not cool. It's a fantastic book, and it was high on my rankings of books. The only quib that I have is the rereadability. That doesn't mean it's not a great book. Okay. I want to make sure that's clear.
Well, okay. Let's go into rereadability. Tell me about it.
The main thing for me is it's not as much of a reveal. Reveals aren't page turners as much for me.
Yep.
And I think a lot of it, I get hung up on more of the little things that were filler before and now are annoyances. Mm-hmm. It's like the highs get higher but the lows also get lower for a book when I reread it. Because I'm like, I remember this part was long and boring.
Really?
But when I first do it, I'm like, oh, I don't know, what's gonna happen? Read the interludes because you've never read them before. Maybe they're super exciting, but no, it's just gonna be a very, very long story about Eshonai in the past, and it's all honestly, basically the same stuff.
For some reason, the Eshonai chapters got way more interesting for me on the reread.
Really?
Yes. Before the first read, I was like,
I believe you.
They could not be longer. The first time I read them,
they're so long.
The second time I read them, I'm like, this is actually fascinating.
I just think they're so long. But for me, they were even longer now because I'm like, I know they're long. I just have to get through it. And that just higher highs, lower lows for me. That was the thing. So the reread definitely is affected by that. Shallan's humor sometimes, the puns and all the stuff she adds in. Okay. Just makes it longer and you're really...
I specifically wrote this down, okay?
So did I. It's right there. Point number 2.
Really? Okay, yep. I want to hear your point first. I'm probably about to slam you individually about this guy.
You might, but it specifically says, now I remember how painful Shallan's puns are.
Okay, well, you want to hear my quote? It says, fake hatred towards puns drive me crazy.
I hear that. Yes, I completely agree.
Okay, do you actually? That's fine.
No, I know what you're saying. Yes. I know what you're saying.
Yes, because it is a trope in stories, but not only stories, in real life. Someone makes a pun, and people do they feel obligated. They're not actually feeling this way to make a oh and a grunt and an eye roll and things like that. But that's not actually what's happening. What's actually is happening is people are impressed by your pun. And they're like, that was actually a really cool thing. But society has taught me that I have to hate this pun. And so I cannot appreciate it.
I totally understand what you're saying. I think you are on the right track.
Yes.
The reason I specifically noted it is because those parts, there's something called comedic timing. Okay? Where it's funny. And then you say another one, and then you say another one in response, and you're like, okay, can we actually have a conversation, or are you only going to respond with I'm just going to leave if you only respond with puns. And I think that you get to a point where you're like, it's not necessarily that the pun, you have to react poorly to it. It's you've responded 3 times now with puns. Let's move on.
Okay. Yeah, beating the dead horse.
Too much. Yeah.
Yes,
it's forcing the comedy too much. The one pun, the 2 puns, every so often sprinkled in comedically. That's, it's creative. You had to work hard to write that in. But if it's just like some of those, especially like she was talking to Adolin at one point, and I was like, I have to write this down because it's way too much. Like it was funny and he reacted, he tried to make his own. That's great. But then she just kept going.
Yes.
Like, relax.
I know. I know.
So that's where I was at.
It's funny because we both like had to write something down.
Yes.
It was such a
we
moment.
wrote about the puns.
Yes, we had to write about the puns. And I just had, I agree with that. You can't beat a dead horse. But I also have to say to all of you out there, do not give in to society. Let your puns be heard and let other people say their puns so we can all be happier people. Because puns are great. They're smart, they're clever, and we need more puns in our lives.
That's absolutely right. Let's rebuild this punny world together.
Yes, it would be great. So I feel very,
That
very
is funny. That made it into both of our notes.
I know,
That's
right?
hilarious.
That's actually hilarious. So, great. We talked a little bit about light and how they're opposites and things like that. I wanted to jump into this theory that you had a whole while
Probably
back.
a really good theory.
It was awesome. I think you came up with this theory.
Oh, yeah, totally. 100%. If it's a good one, it's me.
It was about music and sound.
Oh,
on
yes!
Roshar. Yes. And you were talking about the shapes of the towns and the cities. This is not what you're thinking. Now I'm like seeing your eyes. You're like, nah,
I'm trying to remember where you're going with this.
But I think, is it if you play certain music or tones or something?
Oh, this isn't me. This is in the book.
Is it in the book?
It's in the book.
Am I spoiling something?
It's in the book.
This is later.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Pause.
Pause.
That's not a spoiler, though. It's a random anecdote that they talk about, so I wouldn't worry about it.
But they talk about it, how it makes shapes and stuff, and then they realize that it's matching I thought for sure you talked about this.
No, it's something very similar that I mentioned on our Dune podcast, though.
You're right, with the worm.
Yep, and harmonic resonance.
Maybe I'm just remembering from the first read and everything.
Oh, if you want to hear my tirade on harmonic resonance, you should probably watch the Dune video, because it's a good one. Did it make it into the edit? I hope so.
Yeah, it
was
did.
Good.
I don't know.
No, this is it.
Do they really talk about that later?
The Ardents do, yeah.
Oh my gosh,
For sure.
I can't believe that. But I thought it was brilliant, because I was remembering back to when I was rereading Way of Kings.
Actually, I'm not even sure if it's in this book. I think it's in a previous book.
Okay, this would make it even better, because I've been waiting for this book to happen so I could talk about it without spoiling anything. We're just going to assume that it is...
I think it's in a previous book.
Yeah, because she talks about at the beginning of the book, like, why are these towns seem to be shaped in such interesting patterns.
Yeah.
And she's talking about that and everything, and I'm like, that's fascinating. This is not in this book.
It is.
This is not.
He pulls out a metal sheet, puts sand on it, and draws a bow across it. A rosined bow across this metal sheet, and the sand vibrates and creates a pattern.
This happens in another book, or does it happen in this book? It happens
in a previous book in this Stormlight Archive.
Okay.
It does.
But yeah, if it does or if it doesn't, either way,
let's talk about it.
Whole thing about the tones of Roshar, about moving things across, like using tones to transfer Stormlight, how they're hearing tones all the time, and rhythms, how like the people, the singers who are originally there hear the tones. It's because the planet is actually making tones, and it's shaping the planet based off of these things.
Okay. I think yes. I think the point that I'm talking about from a previous book is a small part of what you, I think, are theorizing here.
Yep. Okay. So now, is that appropriate to have shared right now? Am I not spoiling anything?
It's your own theory, and I wouldn't credit that to me. I think that's your theory.
Oh, well, I was going to give it to you.
It's related. It's related to something that they talk about in the other books.
Yeah.
For sure. But I think it's a good one. It's a good theory.
Yeah. I was totally blown away. And so it's kind of like, I don't know, it just feels like every single planet has their type of investiture. Yeah. There's some other books that make me think that, but I will not get into that because I don't want to spoil anything. But it makes me think that the investiture here is everything that's happening on this planet is related to the tones. Yeah. And which could also include the Stormfather and the storm walls that are coming across.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Why doesn't cultivation get a storm?
Not
good enough?
She's got other influences and everything. She doesn't have the storm. She has the Night Watcher.
Yeah, but the other two tones get a storm. That's what I'm saying. It seems like everyone should have one.
Well, it was recent that Odium got a storm. They don't even know how the storm came about.
That's a good point.
Yep.
It's a fair point. Well, I think one of the interesting...
Are you predicting a cultivation storm?
Well, wouldn't that be something, eh?
That would be interesting.
It would be probably a tsunami. I do think, keeping on the topic of like the science of light and I don't know, harmony, rhythms, tones, I think it's interesting. And it's the bulk of this book, so it's okay that we spend a bit of time on it. I think it's a good discussion. The reason I say that is she was experimenting a lot with prisms and what they do to divide light, right?
Yep.
And we've all seen the prism experiment. You shine white light through a prism.
Into a rainbow.
It refracts, into a rainbow. And it's cool. You're just dividing the different bands of light, the different spectrum, across the spectrum. And the way that it divides is interesting because, on the other hand, sound, right, doesn't normally affect light in any way, really. Mm-hmm. It's like they're completely different things. Yeah, light's kind of a particle and a wave, and that's another thing. But the fact that it affects the shapes, and the shapes are like those mini prisms that are containing the light within themselves as best they can, but the sound, the vibrations of the sound affect the gemstones and force them to like either transfer or remove light, but only specific sounds, right? Because everything like this desk, the mics, anything is going to have a resonance pitch.
Yep.
That's why people can break glass with their voices, right?
Really interesting. Yeah.
Everything has its own pitch and it's built into that thing. Like the essence of that thing, you hit that pitch and that thing will start to vibrate. I think it's the exact same with these stones. And that's why specific light can be held in specific stones, and those stones are affected by the tuning fork she uses, which is cool. I just like a lot of research has to have gone into that.
Interesting.
A lot of research has to have gone into that. It's just cool to.
So you're just crediting Sanderson for all the science that he had to learn to do that.
Oh yeah. I think it's a big credit to the science, and it's just because it's fun because you feel like you're discovering, and you're not like, oh, I'm being retaught physics in a weird, different way that doesn't really make sense. It's more like, oh, you know what? I see how that could work and make sense. I think it's the best way to do it. It takes more effort, more research, bigger team to like figure all that out as an author. I think it's so worth it.
Oh yeah. I think that's really neat. And the amount of people that he has to talk to as well, it's really funny. I've heard him talk in other podcasts saying that he's like, he talks with physicists and everything. He's like, so what if I did this? They're like, yeah, it actually doesn't work with physics.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
But it is funny though too, because he wants to try and approach that line of, yes, but this is still fantasy, so I can still...
Yeah, people are flying around. So it's like, okay, we're pushing.
I know. It's like, you got to be careful not to go too hard into physics and stuff, because you don't want to actually live by all the rules of physics. And so if you lean too hard into it, people are going to expect that you have to follow that. And so he's trying to be careful of walking that line.
100%. And yes. I think it is funny that we have conversations about physics and like your theory was floating. It's like, we got to accept the fact that stuff's weird.
Yeah. Your theory?
Yeah. It's a tower in the sky, isn't it?
No, it's not in the sky.
Why did I always think it was in the sky?
Yeah, I thought I jumped in on that.
Dude, thank you.
Yeah.
I can't be the only one. Come on, guys.
Well, there's a picture in here.
Yeah, it makes it look like it's on a cloud.
Oh no, that's not a cloud. That's the.
Well, it's a cloud-looking mountain.
It's a mountain,
and that's somebody else's fault.
Yeah. See, they're showing it cut into the side of the mountain, and it goes down into the mountain.
Why is it so hard to get to then?
It's because it's in the mountain range.
Yeah, but you could... Okay, it feels like there was no way to access it except for an oath gate, and apparently you just walk right in. So that's lame.
That's how the singers got in.
Pretty sure they flew.
The Parshendi. They did not
The Parshendi?
Parshendi, yeah.
Were they Parshendi at this point? Is that what they're called?
Are they?
Anyway,
we're
getting out of our depth as casual fans.
They definitely are called. They're 100% called the Parshendi.
Okay, so I learned something new, but I will move on from that in a second. I learned that yes, it is not floating in the sky, which would be cool, but whatever. Now, one thing that I actually wanted to say before we move on to all the things that I didn't know about.
Well, wait a minute. I need to explain to you that I know for sure it's not floating
because
the deepest ones go through the ground and they're like floating on their whole way, like they're through the ground, like swimming through the ground,
which is so creepy.
Yeah, it is. Those guys are creepy.
They're also nuts.
Yeah, they are.
Anyway,
I want to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. I appreciate the knowledge, and I feel like I'm a better person for it.
Tell us if they're called Parshendi or singers or listeners or... There's a lot of names for them right now.
Yeah, but a lot of those names are old names. Anyway, what I was going to say is about physics. And the question that I keep coming back to is like, why is he using real physics when half of the world just doesn't really follow most of the physics?
Yeah.
And the reason I think it makes sense is because they're just laws that we already know and don't have to be explained. You know, if it was, everything was completely out there, didn't follow any rules, like nothing made sense. There are certain elements like gravity and like all these things, the theory of gravity, I should say. But all these things that just inherently makes sense and doesn't require the author to do a lot of explanation. So she uses sound, and there's light and a prism. Like the concept of a prism and light, he doesn't have to explain because we get it.
Yep.
So you're relying on things that people already know just to simplify the explaining process. It's not like, oh, I'm bound by all the rules of physics, but the more rules of physics I use, the more it's going to make sense to a reader.
Yep.
That's why I think he does it.
This is what I love this quote from Wit. I'm going to give like totally like give a what
paraphrase.
Paraphrase. Yes.
Sure.
Paraphrase it. He's like, that's the thing about storytelling. A good storyteller, he just cheats. And like, I love that quote because it's so true. Because a storyteller, there's a lot of times they specifically do not go into detail because they know that the reader will be able to fill in the gaps with their own imagination much better.
And it connects them better to the story when they're invested in it.
Yep. Like this is this was the idea of M. Night Shyamalan.
Okay. He
is the creator of The Sixth Sense, Signs, all these movies and things like that. He was much better several years ago than he was in his recent stuff. But anyways,
review coming later.
Yeah, apparently. But in his older stuff, I love listening to how they make these movies and they get interviewed and stuff. And one of his things that he would say is that in, for example, the movie Signs, there was a lot of times instead of showing the thing that they're looking at, they'd show the people and their reactions of like what they're looking at.
Oh yeah.
Because your mind can give you a much better thing of like what this mystery box is, and then like you can even like make for the person. And so if you're able to avoid that as much as possible, you're able to imagine, well, this happened because of this, this, and this. And like you're just assuming these things that you're not even realizing that you're assuming,
and
which makes the story even better.
Absolutely.
Which is such a cool way to do things. I really like that.
That is pretty darn cool. So I agree with you.
Authors do that all the time. Like, it's just really cool. So
I like it.
Saying that it works with the physics thing too.
I'm glad that Sanderson does it that way.
Yeah. So works with the physics so that you don't have to say all the physics. You're depending on them.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So in a quick transition, I want to talk a little bit about one of the other things, and I think I'll be done talking about the things that I didn't love. One of the things that gets a lot of hate, and it's not that I didn't love this part, but it gets a lot of hate normally, is like Kaladin's depression cycle.
Okay.
Right? That he goes through a lot of difficulty, and you think about like he's trying to fight, but he's also battling these inner demons the whole time, right? So you don't feel like you're getting all of Kaladin, and you're used to this like unbeatable warrior Kaladin who can beat anybody. He's like up for the fight anytime. He's ready to go. And now he just feels like he's like wounded. He just isn't living up to that expectation you have for him. Anyway, so I think the reason that I recognize a lot of that criticism more in the reread is because it's not just his sadness, but it's compounded by like Syl is also going through a very depressive cycle.
Yes.
I didn't recognize that as much at first.
I forgot about that too.
And I think that's kind of interesting. Where she's like, now that she went to the bondsmith to try and understand Kaladin better. And now she knows more about her past and her previous Radiant. So like she's having her own like moment of loss and difficulty, and they're trying to get through it together, but it just kind of makes for an even more gloomy part of the book. So I can see why people are more affected by that.
How do you feel about it?
I think it's cool because it represents just a different kind of triumph for him. Mm-hmm. And I think they're emotions and feelings that a lot of people have felt and are very real. And I think that's just a really cool, just to see it happen to a hero, to see it happen to someone who's like life is just all on the up and up, and he's got all this happening to him, and it's wild to see like just the way that some of that is described is very real, very connective, and I think it's just really cool to see, and I just think it's fun to see him getting through it, getting out of it, and helping others to get out of it too. Yeah. It's a crazy place to be.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of criticism from people on this book because of that, and they're like, I just couldn't get through like the depression, of woe is me, the whole book. But honestly, I like it. I really enjoy the mental struggle that
I really appreciate it too. Yeah.
Like like I said before too, it helps you learn how people are might be going through depression in their own lives too, so it puts you in their shoes. But also for me, my favorite part of stories are the internal struggles that people go through, characters. It's part of good character development, and it has
to feel real.
Yes, yeah. And that is 100%. I would say Sanderson's strongest writing ability is the ability to make very real characters. That's why I love it. That's why I love like Christopher Nolan as a director too. I feel like he makes very good characters. So I've just found like I am drawn to creators who can make things feel very real.
Yeah.
And I feel like the best way to do it is through character development.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think we both like that part. So if it was tough for you to read that part, that's fine. But I think it definitely adds to the book.
I will say I found my first hole ever in a Sanderson book.
Oh.
Somebody close this hole for me because I am kind of shocked that this was not addressed.
Go for it.
Why in the world did Kaladin not just use his flying hand thing to just fly away from the tower and then just get to a spot where he can use his radiant powers?
Don't they diminish over distances?
What?
The abilities of, isn't it connected to something? It's connected to weights, right? So the
is.
further he would get away, the less it would work.
It doesn't diminish over distances. That's why span reeds can be used over like the whole of Rashar, and that they're able to fly the entire flying Bridge 4 across like thousands of miles away.
But I thought they needed a ton of Stormlight for that because of that exact reason.
I don't think it diminishes. I don't think it does.
Well, that does seem like a hole then. Like,
I know.
why didn't they just fly on the Eagles?
I know. It did feel a little bit like that when I was thinking about that. But someone help me with that hole there. I think you could explain it away by saying Kaladin would not want to leave the shower
reset every time.
Leave the tower because he wants to make sure that the nodes are protected.
Yeah, but at the end he just took out the last one.
No, there's another one.
Aren't there 3?
No, there's 4. Yeah, that's what they said at the end of the chapter.
Yes,
there's one more.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they were told that there were 3 originally, right? But there's like secretly one more.
No, they knew. They knew that there was another one.
Okay.
But she's like, just don't destroy all of them because then it destroys the tower if you destroy the last one.
Yes.
Yep.
You need to have one more way to get... Well, the tower should have its own light. Why do these even exist? That's what I want to know. The tower used to function off of its own tower light.
Well, that's the tower doesn't know what's going on. Doesn't know how it's supposed to get its light back. That's the big
Yeah,
problem.
but why did these gems that have direct paths to the center of the sibling even exist if the entire point was for the tower to create its own light? That's what I want to know.
Well, some of it has to be generated from stormlight. That's why they had one hanging out on the outside of the tower to generate from the storms.
That one makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the other ones.
They don't know where the cultivation light comes from. That's what they're trying to figure out.
Is that what those other 3 should have been for?
I don't know. That's a good
It just
question.
seems weird.
Yeah.
Like there's this
It's
way.
another mystery of the tower, which
Okay,
makes this
fair
book
enough.
so interesting.
Fair enough.
Like, I love that. I think it's so fun. Great.
Speaking of mysteries, I have a little bit of like a quick anecdote about a couple parts that I really liked in the book because they're just random tidbits of information. I can't remember if it was in like the beginning of a chapter, or if it was in one of those little snippets.
Yeah.
I think it's in a snippet, and I know who's writing these snippets, but I don't know if we know at this point who's writing the snippets. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. But one thing that was really cool was talking about like this weird sand.
Oh,
Yeah.
I missed that snippet?
Really? There's 2 of them.
Wow.
Talks about, one is like, oh, there's this weird sand that's like a part. I don't know why it works the way that it does. And then the second one's like, it's something that grows on the sand. So if you can find the seed of that, I think it's like I don't know if it's a bacteria or whatever. I'm like, it's got to be white sand, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. So this is one of the reasons why I was so excited.
And I'm like, I probably should have finished that book because now I don't know what he's talking about the seed and something growing. Like, probably makes sense to people who finished that book, but I didn't.
Unless it's a Tress reference.
No, I don't think so. Unless something came from Tress to there. That'd be crazy.
Yeah. But I will say this is one of the reasons why I was so excited for you to reread this book after having reread the rest of the Cosmere.
Yeah.
Because they have so many
little
Easter
things like
eggs
that
in
are
this
cool.
thing.
And like the chickens fighting, I loved.
Okay.
So I'm like, I just need to know what the power is of those.
Yeah, they're AVRs.
Yeah,
they're
and
clearly AVRs.
every AVR has its own unique power.
Yep.
And they're just wild powers too. And like some of the most valuable entities in the Cosmere are AVRs.
Yep.
For like random reasons. Like it's interesting. And it's not a big spoiler that even they exist because the whole story about them is like 2 chapters long. So
yeah, no, it's not.
But it's just cool because it's like you see that it happen and them interact with each other, and then you're like, well, who is that? Who had one? And like all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, we never meet the person who was being attacked.
Nobody was killed by Mraize, right?
I don't know why I was assuming that it was Xiles or something like that.
I mean, he seems like the type of guy who would have one.
I know. Oh, but it sounds like... But it wasn't Xyle because he killed him.
It wasn't Xyle.
He killed the guy.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah. I don't know. The whole thing with Mraize is just sketches me like so. It's just so sketchy. It's just so sketchy. It really bothers me because I won't go into anything else other than like I won't tell you who Thydakar is, but like you know who Thydakar is.
I do.
I know who Thydakar is. I'm just gonna say it really bothers me that Thydakar just seems so like evil.
Yeah.
But it makes me wonder because we kind of know that Thydakar has some people that work for him that have more like evil like
the Ghost Bloods, the organization, right?
Yeah, but not like it doesn't seem like all of the Ghost Bloods are like that from other books that we've seen.
They call themselves Ghost Bloods.
Yes.
I don't know. You kind of just feel like that's an evil organization.
You've seen it in other books where they're not all evil though.
Yeah.
Like there are people who are more intense than others.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, is he just hiring on people that are just so intense that they're like come off evil and some people are not? Or is Thydakar driving this like pretty much evil?
It's a good question. Good thing we have an entire series coming out about Ghost Bloods.
I know, dude.
We can find out.
I know.
There is a panel at Dragonsteel this year called Mistborn 3 Theorizing.
No way?
Yeah.
Are we signed up for that one?
I am. I think we both are.
Oh my gosh. I don't think I am.
Dude, you got to sign up for that.
Oh my gosh.
Pause. We'll sign up, but that'll be a good one.
Wow, that's nuts. I'm really glad you told me about that. I'm really
You're welcome.
excited about that.
That's what we're here for, to remind you guys of the panel. Speaking of which, sometime right around when this video comes out, we will post links to the panels that we will be on. We're on 2 panels this year at Dragonsteel Nexus. So if you have tickets and you're going to Dragonsteel, we would love to see you there. It'll be super fun. We will definitely be excited to meet you guys, and hopefully you get to come to the panel. That'd be super fun.
I know, it'd be really fun. We'll
don't ask us hard questions in the Q&As.
That's right.
I'll just say Raffo if I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Jaden, I'm pretty positive we're not signed up for that, by the way.
I had it on my list.
I'm looking at the list of everything we've signed up for, and it's not on there.
We're signing up right after this. Right after we turn the camera off.
Seriously, that's a big one. That's a really big one to go to. So, okay.
Oh, maybe it conflicts with one of our panels. Maybe that was why.
Oh, man.
I'll take a look. We'll look. We'll figure it out.
Okay. Well, sounds good. Okay, so other things we want to talk about. Maya, the sword. There are so many cool things that happen to this.
It's a pretty big one.
We talked about Adolin a little bit. His whole fight, first of all, with all the people that are trying to
he's like mini Dalinar.
Yeah. So
I
cool.
love it.
It's so cool. That moment, I just remember reading it the first time, and this time too, I read it and I'm like, this is awesome.
Like, he's Dalinar.
Yep. And when the first time I read it, I'm like, he's going to die. I was sure he was going to die. But I will say that Maya is the perfect example of why you must always treat your AI experiences kindly.
Yeah, I usually end my conversation with thanks. That was perfect.
Yes, always tell your AI thank you. And Maya is the perfect example because even though you think it is something that is not thinking, someday, if it actually is thinking, we'll be happy to help you instead of attack you.
That's why they say never let your computer know you're in a rush.
What is that? I've never heard that before.
If your computer knows you're in a rush, you're screwed.
Wheel of death.
It's just everything's gonna run slowly.
Don't say it.
No, I'm like I hadn't heard that in a while. But yeah, it's really just it's gonna run slow if it knows you need to go fast.
Yeah,
that's just how it works.
That's
your
right.
Printer will not work if you desperately need it.
Yep.
If it's it's not that big of a deal, it's gonna be so smooth.
I get
but
it.
if you need your printer right now, no shot. It's not gonna work.
I understand, and this will compound 100 times as AI gets smarter and smarter.
Yep. Exactly right.
All of a sudden, all the lights will be red every single time you go to work because AI will know, like, you're not gonna make it on time. I'm thinking, remember that one time you didn't say thank you, or like
the guy who has a green light said thank you.
Yeah, or that one time you insulted AI. You're like, this is stupid. Like, just like this. I just said that. Why did you say that? I'm like,
and they just play it back to you on a loop as you're waiting at the red light.
All these AI moments where like you just like what in the world? Like, but that's why.
Was it on the podcast when we were chatting about AI and saying if an AI could take in all of Brandon Sanderson's works and write Wind and Truth, how far off would it be from the Wind and Truth that he actually wrote?
I don't think we had that. I don't even remember having this conversation with you, but I would think that it's going to be...
I have a lot of conversations in my head too, so could have been. It's hard to know.
I was there in his head.
And I won. I won that one.
Won that? Yeah,
No.
I would say it'd be pretty different. It'd have to be. I don't think
It'd have to be?
Yeah, AI cannot predict what you're going to do. It cannot. Okay, literally, this conversation actually happens in the book. This is a conversation between Dalinar and Taravangian.
This is good.
You remember this conversation, Dalinar and Taravangian? He's like,
If
no
the
matter
future is
how
inevitable.
smart you are in the world, you cannot predict the future. Does not matter. You still have your own choice.
I think that's a great argument, actually, because the element of like, how much do we actually change, and can you program that type of change in?
Yeah.
I think the answer to that actually would probably be yes. With enough processing power and historical data, you probably could. But the one thing that you couldn't is the environment impact, because as the world changes and you react to that world, you change as well.
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't think you'd be able to build.
So
in.
you think if
you lived in a
pause
vacuum,
this moment of time and just say, okay, everyone thinks stop right now. AI is just going to start predicting everything that he's writing next. You think you would nail it?
If he was writing in a vacuum,
Yeah, if he was able to write it in that moment.
I think it could be very close. Today's AI, no. But
Okay.
AI in general, I do think so. But the reason that that's never going to happen is an impossible test. It's just a random theory, because you'd never be able to test that, because he could go to a coffee shop, see someone with a weird hat, and it could completely change the butterfly effect. It could completely change how the book is going to go. Not even consciously. But the environment we live in creates the catalyst for change that we need to become new versions of ourselves, whether that's bad, good, or completely indifferent situations. That becomes the people that we are. And I think that's why, as humans, change is such a big part of it. But I think that persona, if we didn't have environmental impacts, is something that is fairly consistent.
I think that you would have to know every single piece of his brain to be able to come up with the same exact answer that he spits out. Like, you'd have to know on a very, very deep detail of everything about him, even things that people don't know about him externally. Like, only things that he doesn't even understand about himself to nail it.
Yeah.
That would be my thought.
I think you would.
And
is it possible to get to that knowledge with that like empirical data and have some way to like all of the experience you've had, even though you don't realize how much they impacted you, you could still put those into the machine?
I think that, let's say that you could.
Okay.
I still think that you would not get the same answer from the same exact person in the same moment of time of them writing it two separate times.
So let's
like if they write it at the same time, they're not influencing each other at all. I think that it would come out differently, even your own.
Even if it was, what if it was very, very similar? Would you still be impressed?
Of course I would be impressed.
I'll
give you that. I would be impressed.
We have technology today that can basically interact with your brain directly, right? Mm-hmm. Neuralink.
Sure.
Eventually, it might be, okay, consider the fact that I don't know if it's somewhere between like 2 and 10 petabytes of storage exists in the human brain. Right?
Explain to everyone what a petabyte is.
It's really big. It's just a ton of data. Think about
how many terabytes are
megabyte, gigabyte. Oh my goodness, it's late. Terabyte, petabyte.
Okay, cool.
So it's a ton, absolute ton. But you can that's the storage that they say is in a human brain or something like that. Like, it's quantifiable.
Yeah.
So if an AI Neuralink was possible, could you like download memories? And if you could, would that be enough to create an exact duplicate of what someone would create on their own?
I don't think it'd be ever an exact duplicate.
You're probably right.
Yeah. But
I am
don't even
so
know if
curious.
You could get it similar. I think that
you don't even think you could get it similar.
Well, here's the thing.
Similar.
If there's one, okay, fine. Let's say the very first chapter is similar. Those differences start compounding as you go farther and farther away from that first chapter.
We've got to figure out a way to test this, because that would be so interesting.
Well, because a character makes one decision different then it changes the rest of the book. Actually, I disagree with that. There was a, what was it? Was it Yumi in the Nightmare Painter that talked about this? Or no, there's some story. Maybe it's Avengers. We relate to Avengers all the time. But like,
we actually do.
Yeah, it's like every episode. I don't know how that comes up. I'm not even like, I liked Avengers up until Thanos and like the Infinity War and everything. But like after that, I've been off of Avengers. Like it's been fun.
Oh yeah, well we're on the same page.
Yeah.
The main like 10 movies at the Avengers is absolutely fantastic. It's a cornerstone of
it was great
entertainment in our lives,
film history. But there's a theory that says that time runs like a river, and you're not changing the course of that river by just throwing a pebble into that river. Where is this from? This is not me. Have you heard this before?
It sounds familiar, actually.
Like you can't just throw a pebble in there. You have to put like a boulder in the way. Like it has to be something big, a big moment that changes the future. It can't be something small. I did not come up with this. Credit to someone, but like,
are you 100% confident that a pebble would not affect the course of a river?
Maybe one pebble. One pebble is what I'm saying.
Would it not, though?
It gets pushed down the river. But I'm just saying.
But what I'm saying is there is a measurable impact, even if it's just a pebble. If it dislodges one little, the butterfly effect is a real thing.
I don't think
that tiny pebble could push something, could move something, could be the one thing that pushes another branch down the line, and it could actually affect the river.
I think the idea is that
keep time travel out of books. That's really just the idea.
This is
going to ruin everything.
The idea is that time wants to travel in a specific direction, and very, very small changes to things, like it will correct itself
will be overwhelmed
to still
by
go
the
to
momentum.
the same direction.
Okay.
And then without like a boulder being put in the way where it has to go around, then you've actually changed stuff. I think that's the theory. This comes from somewhere. Somebody comment and tell me. It's killing me.
You have to Google it after this because I'm curious now.
It's a very interesting concept, right? But that's what I think the whole AI thing comes back to. It's just like
makes sense.
So I'm with you. I'm like saying like, well, if it's like small differences in the beginning, does it actually change the end? But it depends on how big those small differences are. Anyways, we've gone way in.
Now I want to see if I can like create a version of Wind and Truth just from all of the previous Cosmere books. Like there's no way you could put enough tokens into like a chat GPT to put all these books in. But if you could put all of his books and all of his like intentionally blanks and all of his weekly updates, you could just put his content over the last 20 years, just content he's put out.
Sure.
And say, the new book, Wind and Truth, is coming out. Can you give me a summary of the book?
That would be interesting.
So curious how close it would be to the
really
real book.
Well, all the fans out there are already trying to do it. And they're trying to theorize. That's what the theories of Wind and Truth are, right?
I'm just saying, the chat GPT AI revolution, I think, would be more accurate than theorizing fans.
So we should come up with all of our Wind and Truth theories from AI.
That would be wild.
We do that in our next episode.
We could do that. I could put in summaries of the books at least.
Yeah.
And we can see if it can predict.
We'll give you
That's
the funniest
great.
ones.
We actually do have a Wind and Truth theorizing video coming out. Probably next week?
Yeah, something like
Sometime next week, maybe. When this comes out, maybe like a week and a half.
Yeah.
Keep an eye out. My AI might make an appearance.
Yeah. Seriously. Okay, anything else that we wanted to chat about? Man, we left a lot on the table here.
There's a lot of good stuff in there.
Yeah, there is. We're
always going to miss stuff, though. It's like if you have a specific area in parts 2 and 3 that you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe they didn't talk about it. Let's chat about it in the comments. Let's fight about it.
Let's talk about it. Dude, there's so much that happened. We gotta start moving. There's some interesting scenes that
Let's
we can
do it. Hit me with one.
Okay, first, Taravangian. Those chapters are fascinating. I love Taravangian.
You did touch on it a little bit with your AI and stuff. You started talking about Taravangian and Dalinar, talking about
what did I say?
Odium's plan, inevitability, and then Dalinar's like, no, it can't be because people can change.
We talked about the people who are like how smart he was and stuff. Thank you for the reminder. I love the part when he meets with Odium again, and he realizes that Odium can be tricked.
Yes.
And that there's a human behind the god. And and that the god is lonely. And that the god can't see everything. And like that moment is just so exciting in the book where he just like realizes like, oh, there's something here that I can do with it.
Yeah, there's that little seed of an idea. And you also see the same conversation happen with Renarin later. And Renarin's like, because I can see the future and he can see the future, we conflict with each other.
Yeah, Renarin figured it out.
Yeah, they're actually like conflicting. That's why they don't see each other very well, because every time they do, that changes.
Yep. Which is also cool because I have to jump in there now, but too, Renarin is also one of the most fascinating characters in the Cosmere as well. Like, I am just so fascinated about his Spren being corrupted, and then there's Jean not talking about corrupting other Spren, and now that, in theory, you can have 10 normal orders of Spren, and then 10 more corrupted orders of Spren. Like, what can that do, and how can that change things? And
I mean, we learned in this part too, speaking of powers, that the Fused have 1 and the Radiants have 2. Like, that was a big reveal to me as well. It's like the Fused have 1, but they're really, really, really good at that 1, and they don't run out of Stormlight. That's a Void Light. That's a big deal. They can hold Void Light indefinitely.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Oh, it's super interesting.
But like that makes a big difference when you're fighting, and like they don't have to worry about dropping out of the sky because they can hold their Void Light indefinitely.
Yeah, so cool. And then that also goes with and you were talking about how we also learned in this that since they have 2 different surges, they can combine them to do different things.
And that's why the Radiants don't necessarily do the same thing the same way, even though they have the same surge.
Yep.
Which was a question of ours, I think, or was it earlier in this book or in a previous book? We're like, does a Skybreaker and a Windrunner, do they do those things the same way, even though they can both lash? Is it lash or is it...
they're lashings.
Yeah, even though they can both do like the flight thing.
Yeah.
Is it the same? Do they do it the same way? I don't know if we know, but...
Yeah, that at least the
curious.
overlap, though, because...
Shallan asks that question specifically.
That is interesting.
Because she's like, was I just trained wrong because I was trained by a different order? Remember, she was talking to her new squire, who's also a Lightweaver, but she does soul casting differently. Mm-hmm. She's like, well, this is how I do it, and it works for me. She's like, that's not how you do it, but cause she was taught by a different order of Radiant. Just interesting.
Super interesting.
We find these kinds of things out. This is like the reveal you get in Rhythm of War.
So interesting. Okay, more rapid fire here. 2 moments that I absolutely loved.
Okay.
First one, the whole fight at the well is good.
You want to just put that on our top 5?
I know, just gotta get it later. Right
just
into
put
the top
it on
5.
there. Yep.
Fight at the well.
Crazy.
I remember reading this the first time, and like again is another moment like he's going to die.
I was the same way. I'm like, dang, Brandon Sanderson is literally gonna kill off my favorite character.
Yeah.
Because I was like, he's toast.
That's I know. It's such a moment of despair when they cover the lid of the water.
Sorry, dude.
As soon as that happens, they're like, "Oh shoot, that would work." Those guys are smart. Just suffocate him. Anyways, that was so scary. That was such a scary.
And you're
moment.
really involved. Like your adrenaline is pumping by this point because they've already been, back and forth and fighting and trying to get this. He has this one goal, but you're also like, why do they keep having him do all these hard things? He's already dealing with so much. He's wounded. He's trying to figure all this out. And they're like, you got to go do it now. Like the fate of the world rests upon it. Just has to be you. And you have to go do it. Even though you're tired and wounded and all this stuff. It's like, sorry, man. You're going to go into the fray and fight all these guys.
Sanderson talked about writing this and the beta readers and everything. And this was during COVID in 2020. And the whole world was kind of locked down and people were depressed about it and everything. And apparently it was even more depressing in the original writing of it, and even more despair. And he kind of realizes
people
the writers
can't take
were
it.
like, okay, this is a little much right now. Like this, you can't make it this bad. And so he even backed off of what it was originally.
Jeez.
So I wonder what he did to that poor guy in the original write. So
terrible. Yeah, you just feel so bad. You're like, everyone's relying on him again. You're just like, give this guy a break.
I know, right? Then he barely survives, but now he's not healing anymore. But which leads to the next super, super cool part. Is when Dalinar flies through,
saves him,
and
blows him
back up.
Yeah, he's like, get back up there.
Yeah, woo.
You're fine.
But
anyway, bye.
Him going in that whole scene.
They have a
him
conversation, like it's
flying
wild.
through the storm is amazing. Having that conversation, I think it's hilarious when he lectures the Stormfather. He just gets upset, and the Stormfather's like he tells him the same thing he told Kaladin. He's like, I'm the storm. I can't prevent stuff from like hurting people or anything. Like, it just happens.
Like a storm wouldn't be a storm if it didn't rage.
Yeah.
Or something like he says.
And then Dalinar just basically yells at him like, be better. Like, you have to be better. I've got to be better. You got to be better too. And then it just quiets down the Stormfather. Like, he's almost like embarrassed. He's like timid to talk to him.
Yeah.
He's like, wow, like Dalinar, it almost feels like a Yasna moment, right? How she just talks with authority and commands, to the point where like the Stormfather used to be the one commanding him, but now he's like kind of talking to Dalinar. I was like, this is okay to like say this? Like, got in trouble the last time I said something, but
yeah, I
thought that whole scene was super, super good.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
It's one of those one-liners from Dalinar. You're just like, man, he's good at that.
Yeah.
The intense one-liners.
Yeah, he's good at being the lecturing dad.
Yeah. No, it's good. I think that's a key part, because it also shows that the Spren can grow and change.
Yeah.
And be better.
I know.
Which you didn't think before, because they've constantly been saying Spren are constants. Spren are just emotions and ideas. Like, you can't change a storm. Apparently you can.
I know. So what does that mean for the storm in the future? Will the storm continue to be a storm? I don't know.
It'll just be wind and truth. Boom.
Oh my gosh.
Got him.
Okay. Any other things that you wanted to bring out? Anything from Shallan? We didn't talk about that much. Talked about, there's her personality.
I feel like I've circled around all the things that I
I
just feel like we've gone in so many different directions. But no, I think that, yeah, her personalities, or again, just harder for me to reread. Because it's just that was a similar type of, I just don't understand that as much, so it's harder for me.
So for me, I straight up cannot remember who's moving the block, the communication cube, to talk with Mraize.
That's a good point.
Yeah, can you remember?
I'm like, oh, it was a spy. Oh, wait, no. Was it Pattern? Like, wait, is it her?
Yeah, is it she doing it?
Dang it, I don't remember anything.
Do you remember who it is?
No, I don't.
I don't either.
I'm like reading this, I'm like, man, how did I not know that?
I know. Yeah, I actually, and now as I'm saying it, I think I do remember who it was. But I won't tell you if I was right or wrong, but I'll tell you what I was theorizing at this point.
Okay.
I did think at this point that it was formless. Even like from the very beginning. She's like, somebody moved it. And I was like, right away, I'm like, it's formless.
It's
formless
the secret
is already
identity.
around, and she doesn't know it yet. And so, as of right now, I will say that's my theory, because I'll pretend like my old self. Reading through the books. But that was an interesting scene
theory.
And everything.
It's a good theory.
And seeing all that, so fascinating. Okay, we ready to go into top 5 moments?
Top 5 moments.
Okay, remind you what the top 3 moments were from the part 1.
Okay.
Was number 1, Moash versus Kaladin, round 1. So this was him fighting and being depressed, and Moash trying to get him to kill himself. Number 2 was the appearance of the 4th bridge.
Pretty good.
Yep, pretty good. And number 3 was the assassination of
Elay.
Honestly,
it's shocking to me how little we covered in just the first video, because there's so much that's happened since then.
I know. It feels like
the 4th bridge.
Ago.
Whatever. That was so long ago.
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
That's pretty wild. So we got some good moments to add to that then, for sure.
The fight at the well, I'm putting it right at number 1.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm okay with that. I like Yasna fighting with soul casting.
Yes, Yasna fighting.
I think I'd probably put that number 2. For now.
Yeah. Relax,
everybody. I think is really cool. I think it has big implications for the future of the Radiance, and I think that's awesome.
Yep. I'm gonna say Yasna fighting.
And if they use my idea for how they're gonna like cinematography do that, then it's even cooler.
Oh, I know. And it's also cool because it's the first time you're seeing the 4th ideal with shard plate.
Yeah.
Which is so neat. And it's actually interesting too, because she gets her helmet like bashed in or whatever,
mm-hmm.
and I think the armor reacts to it like in almost pain, like the Spren react in a painful reaction.
That's wild.
Which is so interesting. So, anyways,
what else you got?
Another moment is for me. Dalinar flying through the storm and communicating with Kaladin.
Okay.
I loved that moment.
It was pretty cool. The Dalinar in the storm.
Yep. And the whole moment, it just gives me chills too, because this is when he realizes, when Kaladin yells up to him and says, like, the tower's been taken. Like, we need help, but like they've stopped our abilities, and tells him everything. And that's the moment when Dalinar thinks, oh shoot, like they're in trouble. Like, I got to get over there right now. This is
really bad.
Yep. And it was just the moment you've been waiting for. How is he going to figure this out? I thought that was a great moment. I thought that was really great. Other top moments.
Do you want to pull any like Eshonai, Venli moments into this list? I know oftentimes they get ignored.
like this whole
podcast. Do you want to add any parts like that, like training with actually like becoming radiant? Or...
I will say the part that there are two parts that I thought were really interesting. One was when she realizes that Void Spren is inside a Kremling, which is really interesting. Okay. Not like a top moment, but thought that was cool. Other thing though, when she first uses her powers to touch the stone and feel the rhythms of the stone, and the stones are telling her the past and everything, and that was actually super cool. I really liked that whole moment. So I would even throw that in a top 5 for so far.
I think her conversation with at this point, is it, who is she talking to?
R'laine?
No. It's anyway, she's talking to the Regal she's working for at the time, and she's telling her about all this stuff, about how fused work and how the fused work and why they're different than Radiance, and who's more powerful and who existed first. Like, who would you rather be? I just think it's like there's a lot of good information that happens there. Maybe it's not a top 5 moment, but it was a big moment for me in the book.
That was a good moment, and also very interesting to catch this time that Leshwi mentions to Kaladin straight up that I want to be at peace with you guys, which is. Do you remember that? That was crazy.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, she says it like when they're about to fight, and she's like, just surrender now. Like, we do a better job at governing and everything. We can live in peace. We don't have to keep fighting. And like, kind of, it's been hinting at it. But
then Kaladin has that conversation with his dad very similarly, and just says, "No, we can't be at peace. We will never be."
Oh my gosh, we have to talk about this. Okay, Lirin says something that is huge at the end of part 2. Okay. He is yelling at Kaladin about the death of him killing the Parshendi fused. Mm-hmm. And he's like, what have you done? Like, I have made oaths. Not to harm. And there may be a very, very... I remember thinking that the first time reading that, thinking like that sounded very fishy, that Sanderson phrased it that way.
Like a Hippocratic oath? Or?
So easy to throw it right at the Hippocratic oath. But there has to be more there than that.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that's a huge Easter egg.
More fodder for our theory.
We love this theory. It's a good theory.
That Lirin is honor. Is that what we're going with?
At the very least, that he is an influential member of like that
group,
high society on the Radiant side.
Yep. And this all comes back to my theory that this is why the Radiants. What they did is they gave up their weapons of war for peace, because they decided that was the only way that they could just keep Odium away, is that they would not go to war anymore. They would give up their oaths with their spren even to not protect anymore, because they thought that would stop the desolations from happening. Yeah. And that's why Lirin has made an oath to not harm either, because he was a part of that.
That would be crazy. I think it's a great theory.
It's so crazy.
I'm excited to see it come to pass in the next book.
I had to throw that back in there. Also, super harsh on Lirin's part. It just rips into him. Like, it was just, woo, it's crazy. But okay, so do we want?
So we have 3 now. Do we want to try and fit the other ones in to decide if we need to get some more, or do you want to add some already?
I think. Is there anything else that you wanted in there?
Because there's not a big. Moash fight.
Adolin protecting the honor
that's
spren.
A good one.
I love that moment.
Adolin and the honor spren, yeah.
Yep. Any other ones?
there's powerful moments, but they last like so long. I feel like it's not a one thing to point at.
Like what?
I'm just talking about like his experience with like the mentally ill patients. It spans
that's fun.
6 chapters. Like it can't be a moment, but I think that whole story is cool. I wouldn't put it on our list, but it's cool.
Okay, cool. Well, we've got 4 things that we've got here.
Which one of the last book gets to go into the list? Because I think this list is more powerful than the first book's list.
I would say so. The first one for me is probably the fighting at the well. I think that is.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Number 2, I think I do like Yasna being
Me
there.
too. Yeah.
Fighting there. I probably
I'm close on Dalinar and the Moash versus Kaladin. That's where I'm like, which one becomes number 3?
I think Moash and Kaladin. Oh, maybe the 4th bridge appearance.
The 4th bridge appearance becomes number 3?
It's just so cool. They're all flying through the air and fighting and all these things.
No.
It's not that cool.
It's not as cool as Dalinar in the Storm. It can't be. It could be 4th.
Dalinar in the Storm is pretty cool. I think I kind of like Adolin better than Dalinar in the Storm.
I can get behind that.
Okay, cool.
But then I want to put... Honestly, I'm kind of surprised the assassination of ELA made it that far. And now I'm like, that's like the least... That's like 8th now. There's only 7 on the list.
Seriously. Okay, so we've
Kaladin and Xyle was an honorable mention. That's such a good one.
What were we thinking?
And then we have Kaladin against the Pursuer with no Stormlight. I mean, come on. We have really good... How did those become honorable mentions? And the assassination of ELA is on the list. What are we doing? Like,
why didn't you let us know about this in the comments? This is the commenters' fault.
That's a good point.
I just can't. Okay, cool. I put Moash and Kaladin as number 5. So right now we've got the fight at the well. That, honestly, that moment, when I think about Rhythm of War, there are certain moments...
That's the exact moment I think of.
That's the moment I think of.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
I'm glad you say that too.
And the discovery of like the tuning forks and
oh yes,
like those 2 moments. I'm like, that's basically the whole book for me.
Yeah, seriously. Isn't it fun that there are moments like that in book? Every book has this moment.
And one other part that we haven't read yet.
Yes. Yes, that part. Okay, cool. So the fight at the well. Actually, yeah, and Yasna fighting in Shardplate and with Soul Casting is number 2. Number 3 is Adolin protecting the Honor Spren in Shadesmar. Mm-hmm. Number 4 is Dalinar in the Storm talking with Kaladin.
And that makes number 5, Moash versus Kaladin, round 1.
There we have it. Those are the top 5 moments, official for now, through parts 2
part
and 3.
3 and interludes.
Yep.
Which we didn't even really talk about. Man.
Oh,
so much stuff in here. Leave in the comments anything that you have that you think would be just a great addition to this, especially as people watch this as they're rereading. They want to see your comments just as much as they want to see ours. So please leave those in the comments. We love reading them too. And don't forget to subscribe if you're not already. If you want to continue with us for the parts 4 and 5, that'll be coming out next week. Just in time for Wind and Truth, so we're excited about that. We're working on it, and we'll see you in the next chapter.